All right. Welcome, welcome. If you are new here, I am so glad you're joining us. I hope you find it to be a great use of your time. If you've been here before, welcome back. I always say Friday is my favorite day, not because it's Friday, but because I get to see people that are really excited and wanting to grow in their role and just as a person. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to comment, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more videos on legal technology talk. All right, let's get into it. This isn't a real long one, but it's a really self-analytical one to really look into yourself and look into the firm of where things break. So I just want to set the frame. So we called it Your Worst Client Experience Rebooted today. And I want you to take a second and think about a real moment, not a hypothetical, not a training example. I want you to think about that email, the one that made your stomach drop, the one that started with something like, "Oh, I'm just checking in," or "I feel like we've been left in the dark." Every firm has one, most firms have many. And what usually happens next is the internal spiral. Who dropped the ball? Why didn't someone follow up? Did the assistant forget? Did the attorney wait too long? Why didn't anyone communicate? And today's never about blaming people. So I want to set that expectation right away. Today is about finding exactly when the experience broke, why it broke, and how to rebuild it so it never happens again, how to reboot the process. So let's talk about what clients think they're buying. And we'll start with expectations. When a client hires your firm, they think they're buying legal services. But emotionally, that's really not what they're buying. They think they're buying clarity, reassurance, momentum, and a sense that someone competent is driving the bus. They assume a few things automatically. They assume they'll know what happens next. They assume silence means progress. They assume if something is missing, someone will tell them, and they assume they don't need to chase their lawyer. So those are the assumptions. And none of those assumptions are unreasonable, and they should be ingrained into your signature client experience. If you didn't see that session, you can watch the last open coaching session of last year on our YouTube, talking about creating a signature client experience. All right, so back to it. This is a real client story, um, and it's a very real and very common scenario. New client comes in, intake call goes well, good rapport, everyone feels good about it. Engagement letter goes out, client signs quickly, pays the fees. From the firm's perspective, that's the win. Now the process begins, and this is where things quietly start to crack. The intake collected some information, but not all of it. Documents are still needed. Someone plans to follow up. No urgency. You need to schedule the next meetings. It's on a mental checklist because we got their money and we're in business to collect money. We did that, right? Well, days go by. The firm is busy. The client is waiting. A week passes. 2 weeks passes. The client says nothing yet because they trust you. Another week passes. Now the client starts wondering if they missed something. And then finally, they send the email, just checking in to see where things are at. That's where your stomach drops. The email is not the problem. The email is the symptom of something that already exists with the client. Something already happened, but they waited and then they emailed you. So it's already been a problem for whatever time frame for the client. So let's pinpoint the exact breakdown. Here's where we slow it down. When a client says lack of communication, they are rarely talking about tone or friendliness. They are talking about visibility. They do not know where they are in the process. So we're going to rewind. Where did this break? This isn't when, oh, let me let this person in. There we go. Um, this didn't break when the client emailed, and it didn't break when someone replied defensively, and not when the complaint escalated. It broke the moment the system required a human to remember something. A follow up, a document reminder, a status update, a reassurance email. That is the moment the experience became fragile because humans forgot, humans got interrupted, humans are doing 10 other things. Basically, humans are being humans. And when your process relies on memory, your clients experience silence. When the firm, what the firm thinks is happening in this. So we're going to go to the firm side of this story. From inside the firm, work feels like it is moving. Files are open, tasks are on lists, notes exist somewhere, and someone is waiting on something. But none of that is visible to the client. So, from the client's perspective, nothing is happening. And silence creates stories. And I want you to really remember that. Silence creates stories. They wonder if they're a priority. They wonder if something went wrong. They wonder if they chose the wrong firm. That emotional spiral is what turns a neutral delay into a bad experience. And just think of it in your own experience, just in your life. If you text somebody and they don't respond and it turns into like 3 days, your mind will start to spiral into making up a story of why they didn't respond, when really it could be the text was never delivered. So when you think of it that way, that's what's going through the client's mind. This is not a people problem. And I want to pause here and say this very clearly. It is not about bad staff. It's not about careless attorney, and it's not about lazy teams. Every firm we work with is full of capable, hardworking rock star team members. The failure lives in the system and process design, specifically in systems that ask humans to do robots' work. So let's talk about humans doing a robot's work. And we're going to name the robot work, the work that should be assigned to a robot, not a human. Remembering to follow up, checking whether documents arrived, manually moving data from intake to drafting, sending the same reassurance email over and over, answering where are we at messages all day long. None of that requires legal judgment. None of that requires human nuance. And when humans spend their day doing robot work, the real human work suffers. What's the human work? Judgment, strategy, client reassurance, relationship building, and actually completing the work the client hired you for. So, how do you identify where the experience actually broke? Before you can fix a bad client experience, you have to locate the exact moment it broke. And the mistake most firms make is starting with the complaint instead of the process. So here's a simple way to analyze it. And this is where I dropped the worksheet. And the worksheet is kind of a mind map that'll walk you through. If you have something like this happen, you can pull out that worksheet and go through it to identify all of these things that we're about to talk about. So you could print out 10 of them and just have them ready and just start using them for these types of situation to get you to the result. So here's how you analyze it. First, ignore the emotion for a moment and map the timeline. I get there's nasty emails. Sometimes you have to step away from your desk. You need to go take a breath and get the emotion out of it. Then start at the very first client interaction and walk it step by step. Intake, engagement, payment, document request, drafting, review, filing, follow-up, whatever it may be. Write it out, literally. Or you can have just a sheet of paper that has it listed out and you can just identify where the last one was. Now, second, mark the last moment the client felt confident. Not happy, because they could be happy, but when they felt confident. The last point where they knew what was happening and what came next. When was the last phone call or email that set the next expectation? That moment matters because the break always happens after that. So you can erase everything before that. Now, third, find the first point where the system required memory instead of automation, where someone had to remember to follow up, where a task lived in someone's head, where silence was possible. And you could say, yep, I was supposed to call them to remind them about the document, and I didn't do it. I knew I was supposed to do it. It was in my head. Okay, there's your point. That is almost always the failure point once you find that. Fourth, ask one uncomfortable question. If nobody did anything wrong here, what allowed this to slip? That question removes blame and then it exposes design flaws. And then ask this. If this exact scenario happened again tomorrow, would our system prevent it? If the answer is no, you have not fixed the problem. You just survived it. This is how you identify not just where it broke, when it broke, but why it broke. And then you can make corrections. So now let's reboot the experience. Let's rebuild the experience properly. Same firm, same team members, same type of clients, but a different system, a different process, if you will. First, structured intake, not just collecting data, but setting expectations. What will happen in the conference room for the consultation? This is what you would be telling the client. What happens after they engage? Payment required, list of documents needed in upcoming meetings, and what each meeting's purpose is, what emails they'll receive, what texts they'll receive, and what your expectations are. Clients see what steps are coming. They know documents will be requested. They understand what silence means and what it does not mean. Second, automated follow-ups. The system does not wait for somebody to remember. If documents are missing, the system says so, politely, clearly, and immediately. Third, visible progress. Clients know what phase they're in. This is vital. Not because someone typed an email, but because the system reflects reality. A good example of this is, let's say the attorney reviewed the documents and marked them ready to finalize. With that action, an auto email can go to the client. Your documents have been reviewed by attorney and they'll be finalized. And what is next? It's kind of like the progress bar you see on the Pizza Hut app when you order online, except we all know that that really isn't accurate where it says the progress, but in your firm, it can be. So think of the Pizza Hut app progress bar is how you need to work with your clients and set those expectations of where you're at and what's next at every point in the process. I do want to put a quick warning here. Don't do auto updates if you are not promptly moving through a process. You do not want to highlight to the client that you are not fast and efficient. So don't highlight your weaknesses, but it helps you strive to get to a point where those updates can go out automatically and the client gets that Pizza Hut progress bar experience. And then fourth, repeatable drafting. Data flows automatically. First drafts are generated. Humans review, refine, and apply judgment. Documents are then finalized, printed, filed, and ready for sign meetings. No scrambling, no starting from scratch. And each of those points can have an auto message to the client. Hey, we drafted your documents. We've reviewed your documents. They are finalized and your sign meeting's already on the books. Here's what to expect at the sign meeting. Here's what you need to bring. Here's who you can bring. And here's the date of your sign meeting that we have already scheduled. And it hopefully is a week to 10 days early. So you're just done and you can move to the next client and it's complete and ready. Nobody's scrambling, nobody's stressed. There's no breaking communication. So what changed for the client? We're going to look at the client experience. Now they are never guessing. They're never wondering if they're forgotten. They feel informed without being babysat. Communication improves without anyone sending more random emails. And when clients do reach out, it's for real reasons, not status anxiety. And remember that if you're not using texting with your clients, only email, you have to change. 21% of emails are opened, 93% of texts are opened. You're shooting yourself in the foot if you are not utilizing text messaging, specifically automated text. You can have invoices, forms, all of that go right to text messages that they can do on their phone. Maybe they're on a road trip and they're in the passenger seat. They can sit and do that. So if you're not using or you're not using text to their potential, let us know. We can help you build that up by scheduling a discovery meeting. So that's what changed for the client. What changes for the firm? This is inside the firm. Fewer interruptions, fewer apologies, fewer fire drills. Staff stops reacting and they start operating. Attorneys stop chasing and they start advising. You're no longer spending the first 10 minutes of every client meeting or phone call apologizing why something happened in the way it did. It eliminates all of that and it feels professional, high level, 5-star experience. And that's what your signature client experience really is. And here's the capacity shift most firms do not expect. You move faster without rushing. That is the difference between chaos and flow. And why do firms struggle to fix this alone? And this is the tricky part. Most firms know something is broken, but they cannot pinpoint where it broke. They hear the complaint, but they don't map the moment it started. And that's where we come in. We help firms identify the exact process and system breakdown. We pinpoint when it happened, we explain why it happened, and then we can help you implement solutions that prevent it from happening again. Not theory, not generic advice. Real workflows, real automations, real advice, real change that boosts your client satisfaction scores. And if you're not watching your client satisfaction scores, you absolutely need to have your finger on that pulse. Schedule a discovery with us. We have some tools to help you get your client satisfaction scores in a very efficient and automated way that doesn't interrupt your day. So what's the bigger message? And I want to say this clearly because it really matters. Automation does not eliminate jobs. And we say this all the time. Don't fear for jobs because of automation. Pardon me. It removes friction so firms grow enough to hire. You become so efficient, your signature experience is so well known in the community that your clientele is growing and growing. And now you have the capacity to take on those more clients, and then you can hire. It removes chaos so people can do the work they were trained to do. Better systems create better client experiences. Better client experiences create trust. Trust creates growth. And those are the defining characteristics of a firm's signature client experience. So out of all of this, here's what I want you to walk away with. The key takeaways. Client complaints are symptoms. The real failure always happens earlier in the process. Lack of communication really means lack of visibility. Silence creates doubt. The moment your system relies on human memory, the client experience becomes fragile. This is not a people problem. It is a process and system design problem. Automation protects human judgment by removing friction, chaos, and interruption. If the same issue happened again tomorrow, it is not fixed. It was just survived. And firms that grow are not working harder, they are working cleaner. And I want to say that last one again because that's the biggest takeaway today. Firms that grow are not working harder, they are working cleaner. Every bad experience is a system talking to you. When you hear lack of communication, what you're really hearing is your process broke. Fix the system and the people shine. So every bad client experience is a gift if you look at it in the right way. Of course, you never want bad client experiences, but take it as a gift. It tells you exactly where your system failed your teams and your clients. I am going to say you can do this preemptively. You can look at your system, write it down step by step and everything that happens, and make sure that everything is documented. Everything is feeding you things that you would instead have to remember. And if you do that, you're going to minimize the chance of it happening. So if it does happen, it was just one that you might have missed in the review of your process. If you want help rebooting your worst client experience into something scalable, human, and repeatable, that's what we do. So schedule the free discovery with us. We'll walk you through your process, find the breakdowns, and show you what clean actually looks like. All right, I'm going to stop the recording and go into open Q&A.